discuss and explore the place and function of preaching in the church. My name is Ben Smith. I'm a pastor in rural South Georgia, and I've been trying to learn how to preach for a little over 20 years. Now, this podcast is about preaching, but it's not a podcast just for preachers. In fact, my heart for this is that it will bless the church. So on the podcast, I'm having conversations with mostly pastors about the role of preaching, the labor of preaching, the effectiveness of how one preaches, and much more. And I'm hoping to help the church recover an understanding and an appreciation for what preaching is and how God has ordained its role in the church. So help me spread the word, and that is in your podcast app, whichever one you use, be sure to follow, subscribe, and here's a secret one. If you would comment, that helps the algorithms push up the podcast. And then, of course, if you know somebody that this would be helpful for, I would strongly encourage you and count it a great favor if you would send them a text and share the podcast with them. Today, my guest is Brian Carroll. Brian's the lead pastor of Chattanooga Valley Baptist Church in Flintstone, Georgia. Prior to that, he served Northside Baptist Church in Noonan, Georgia. And prior to that, he was a youth pastor during his education. He's got a Master's of Theology from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, a Master's of Divinity from Beeson Divinity School, and he and I share the alma mater of our undergraduate as well. He is a graduate of Shorter University with a degree in Christian Ministries. Shorter is there in Rome, Georgia. Brian and his wife, Heather, they have two children. Brian, it is so good to have you on View from the Pulpit today. Thank you for having this conversation with me.
Hey, Ben, glad to do it. I'm thankful to have the opportunity to have a conversation about it.
Me too. And so getting ready for this interview, I wanted to get a sense of your preaching and your approach to preaching. And, for all the men that have been on the podcast, I'm trying to mine out of them helpful understanding about their approach to expository preaching, why that's important, how that's helped the church, and those sort of things. And so most everybody that I've talked to has in some form or fashion preached through books from beginning to the end. And most of them, I think all of them so far, though they preach through books regularly, do take moments where they'll step away maybe for Resurrection Sunday or maybe for do it. One of the pastors I talked to at the beginning of the school year did sort of an introductory welcome to church for news folks and those kind of stuff. But I listened a couple of weeks ago so we're recording this just a few weeks after Mother's Day, and I listened to your Mother's Day 2025 sermon. And before you preached, you began with some caveats. Now, here's the things that blessed my heart. You said to the church, listen, I'm committed to preaching through books. And you even used the word, I'm rigid about my preaching schedule. And to such an extent that you actually, you even let associate pastors preach for you so that the preaching schedule doesn't stop when you're out of the pulpit. But you said, I know this is Mother's Day, and I'm going to preach the passage. And then I believe it was Revelation 17, I believe is the passage, which isn't that the Whore of Babylon passage? Yeah. We covered the Whore of Babylon on Mother's Day. It was a great day. Oh, so I can't remember now. What was how did the ESV title that? The prostitute of. Was it the prostitute?
It actually, the heading there, it says, the beginning of chapter 17 says, the great prostitute and the beast.
So I watched that and I said, all right, here is a brother who is convictionally holding tight. So tell me, Brian, how well did that sermon go over on Mother's Day?
Again, setting the stage for what was about to come, it was a very well-received message. I was there's more application to everyday life of moms and dads and families than at first glance, and so it was a great day, and it actually had people paying attention. So I'll count it as a win.
It actually was an excellent word, and though you would not expect that at the beginning, you ended with a very encouraging word about the sovereignty of God and overcoming the world. So you've been there 7 years. So I'm assuming your people are expectant of that. Was the church familiar with that type of preaching before you came, or did you introduce the church to expository preaching?
I don't know exactly how my predecessors kind of handled the word. I came into a church that was kind of in a little bit of an unhealthy situation, and that, I guess that's been kind of my ministry, is I get called to churches that are in a bit of a chaos and bring some stability to those situations. And so, I told them up front that I was pretty committed to expository preaching, and they were pretty much going to get book by book preaching. I'll alternate between Old and New Testament books, but pretty much I've stuck to that. I mean, I did a Life of Moses series. That was back even before COVID. And so that was a little less just chapter by chapter. We kind of bounced around a little bit looking at Moses' life, but for the most part, it's been just preaching through books of the Bible for the last 7 years.
Has the church responded well to that?
Yeah. I notice a lot of people have started, Crossway publishes just individual journaling copies of individual books of the Bible. And I've noticed that, a lot of people are asking me, hey, what's coming next? So they can go ahead and get that little journaling Bible ordered. And I'll see people using these little, individual books of the Bible, and they're taking notes. And, they complain if I spend too long in one chapter because they run out of pages to take notes on. And so that's the only complaint that I get. Every once in a while, somebody will, are we still in such and such? Well, it takes a long time to get through some of these things, but I think God blesses that. So
now, you said you were pretty rigid with your preaching schedule. How rigid are you? So do you ever step away from what you're preaching, or do you just barrel through no matter what?
When I start out to do a new book series, I will lay the roadmap out. So I kind of know how long it's going to take me to get there. And looking at holidays and things like that. I've been in Revelation since last August or September now. And even at Christmas time, I continue to barrel through Revelation. The only deviation I made at Christmas time is for our candlelight service. I preached on the passage in Revelation where it talks about the dragon consuming the Christ or the infant, and that's a picture of the devil's attempts to destroy the Christ child and those sort of things. And so I skipped ahead to kind of bring that passage in, but I'm pretty committed to what comes next. I'll be open to, if there's some sort of contemporary moment that shakes us, obviously we'll speak to those things, but I'm pretty committed to just tackling what comes next.
So I know a little bit about your background, not directly. We were not at the school together at the same time, but you and I both graduated from the same undergraduate institution with the same degree. And so I know that in your undergraduate studies, you were not trained to preach expository approach to preaching. So was that something that you grew up under, or when and where were you first exposed to expository preaching?
I actually didn't grow up going to church much at all. So I was definitely not a church goer. I was, our family kind of modeled the Easter Christmas model of church attendance. And so it really wasn't until I graduated high school that I started faithfully going to church, week to week. The pastor that I sat under was not really an expository preacher. I was very topical, that sort of thing. Of course, our experience in college was anything but that.
Right.
I was blessed with a phenomenal preaching professor in my MDiv, and Dr. Calvin Miller. He was a brilliant man of God, brilliant scholar with the English language, and just a brilliant storyteller. And so a lot of my just learning how to preach came from Dr. Miller. But honestly, even as I started ministry, I was still preaching topically, and had a really interesting conversation one day with one of the guys that was on my very first search committee, and he told me that he was concerned that I was weaponizing my preaching.
Oh,
and I thought, okay, that's an interesting critique.
Yeah, you got to explain that one.
I need to understand that better.
Right.
And he said he felt like that I was using the sermon to just go after issues that needed to be gone after, and that felt like like I was going down the wrong direction. And so,
did you think that was a fair critique?
Probably so.
Okay.
The church was not very healthy, and so I was going to use the pulpit to try to fix it, and I didn't understand the dynamics involved, and that caused me to take some time just to kind of reevaluate where I was, and as I learned from some other guys, listening to some other guys, it seemed like preaching just through books of the Bible was the number one, the safest approach, because there was never a question, if something was going on in the church and that topic happened to be brought up the next week, well, there was no way you could look at it and say that, well, he's picking on me or he's calling me out or anything like that. Well, just preach what comes next. But then it really just began to be just a conviction that this is the best way to communicate the truth of Scripture to these people on a week to week basis. They know what's coming. They know where it's coming from, and they're hopefully going to walk away with a better appreciation for the text as a whole.
Mm. So was that in your first pastorate where you moved from your topical approach to an expositional approach?
Yep, first pastorate, and well, I mean, I pastored in seminary, a little laboratory church that they let me try out all the things I was learning in seminary, and they didn't fire me for it, so I'm thankful for them. But my first full time pastorate was certainly probably for a couple of years I was preaching topically, and then the Lord just really just convicted me that there was a better way.
So was that a hard transition for you, and was it a hard transition for the church?
It wasn't hard for me. It was actually easy for me because it eliminated a lot of time being spent on creativity, trying to come up with stuff.
Yes.
I got to come up with something new, some new series, a new topic. I got to make it catchy, and all this. And so for me, just from a planning standpoint, being able to just, turn the page, here's what's next, and from a study standpoint, I don't have to figure out all the context over and over again. It just, in so many ways, it made just the preparation easier. And the church received it. I've slept a few times since I started that journey with them, but I don't remember anybody necessarily running for the hills when I started going through books like that. And so overall, I think for the church, they received it just because, again, they knew what was coming. There was never any surprises. And so even if it was a Mother's Day sermon on the Whore of Babylon, there was no surprises for what was coming.
That's so I'm always interested in how well the church responded, because my own experience was when I began to move in that direction, and it was sort of a slow move for me. So my first thing was I had always intended to, I had even from the beginning had made some clumsy attempts to be expository, even in series type preaching, so we're going to preach on the church, but every text I tried to, at least every sermon was from a text, and clumsily attempted to be expository with that text. But as I began to, I felt like my preaching was increasing in its quality significantly because I was being more and more intentional with working through the text. I got some real pushback from folks, and not in the church I'm in now, but in a previous church, there were some folks who were very happy to communicate to me. They did not think the direction of my preaching was going in a positive way. And I just remember thinking, and I was more, there's that moment where you think, before the Lord, this is a better offering. And I thought, well, if you don't like it, I appreciate that, but I can't go back to what I did before. So it's just interesting how people respond to that.
Well, and Northside was a young church. I mean, I was the fourth pastor they had ever had, and two before me were not there very long at all. And so it was a very young church. So there wasn't a lot of history and tradition of really anything when I was there. I mean, I helped to shape a lot of the tradition. Just I was there longer than anybody else. So I don't know that the church had a long enough history to develop any expectations. And then, of course, when the Lord led me to where we currently are, that was up front and known. So there were no surprises for anybody. And so I did not have those same sort of experiences, but I was also kind of in a different context where there were no expectations, and so so it was good for us.
So we've sort of danced around the subject, but the person listening, whether they be a pastor or a church member, who's for a pastor maybe thinking about moving toward preaching through a book, starting in chapter 1, verse 1, going to the end, or a church whose pastor is beginning to do that. You know, there are some natural resistances of, you mean you're not going to preach a patriotic sermon on the patriotic Sundays and Mother's Day and Father's Day and Christmas and resurrection season and all the rest. So speak a word of encouragement to them. Why is it important to preach through books from beginning to the end?
For the pastor, there's the opportunity to really become an expert. And I think that's, again, when I started preaching the Revelation, the first conversation I had with my staff was, is this going to get me fired? So once we were confident that we'd weather the storm, it gave us an opportunity to really sit down and become an expert in something. And so when you're bouncing around and every week you're spending time trying to understand just all the context that goes into it and everything, there's just so much time that's spent that you can actually you can do that up front and that work is finished. And then you're able to really, deep dive into some of the more nuanced things that you might not have time to do otherwise. And so, I was terrified when it said Revelation was what was next. Like, this is going to be the biggest challenge of my ministry. But man, it's been so refreshing to actually sit down and approach Revelation from what is this really saying? Not what does what do all this group over here say, or that group over there say, are you a premillennialist, postmillennialist, whatever, what did you read the Left Behind books when you were, 20 years ago, all these different things inform us. But man, to just be able to sit down and say, I don't care what these books out here say, I want to care what God says, and to be able to dig into it and get that level of understanding is honestly one of the greatest blessings for the preacher. So of course, there, for a congregation that may not be used to it, there's the challenge and the opposition that's sure to come. But just the privilege of being able to sit down and again, we'll never become fully experts in any of this stuff, but to be able to sit down and have a deep working knowledge of these sort of books is incredible. And I did the prophet Jeremiah before Revelation, and just to be able to. I mean, I've always looked at the major prophets and been like, man, there's just so much here that it's hard to get through some of this stuff. But to be able to really spend time and dig into it and share it with the church, and I think the church knows if the preacher is enjoying what he's studying. The church is able to tell if what I'm investing in is not just for their good, it's for my good too, because I bring a different attitude about it to the pulpit. And so for me, preaching on a difficult passage on Mother's Day, that's a phenomenal blessing, because for this matter that much that we're not going to pay attention as much to what the secular calendar says, that what God says here is more important than what Hallmark says. I mean, I think the church knows that and appreciates that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about preaching through books is you get a front row seat to the providence of God, of the text speaking to issues of the church that you would not have recognized otherwise. So, the accusation or the worry that if you preach through books that you'll be hindered in speaking to the issues that are confronting the church. I've just found the opposite, that the Lord knew what the church needed.
Absolutely.
And it's always just that sweet blessing to go, thank you, Lord, for this good word at this good time.
And even this year, I mean, we were able to cover on Easter Sunday. I mean, there's a great resurrection message that we were able to pull out for Easter Sunday. And so even though the text is, may not say, this is, it's not 1 Corinthians 15 dealing with the resurrection.
Right.
There's still a message there. I mean, we're still resurrection people. And so, and then of course, Mother's Day this year was just phenomenal. I could have asked for a better Mother's Day text. I'll be honest. So,
well, and I think not to stay on your Mother's Day sermon too much, but I do think the contrast of, all right, church, here's where my convictions are having to come to play, was just a helpful word to say. I think this is important, and even on Mother's Day, we're going to barrel through, even with with an awkward title. we're going to go. So one of the things about preaching that is often comes out when you mentioned dealing with it, being sort of a happy laborer with the text, is that preaching is hard. Preaching preparation is really laborious work, but worthy work or worthy labor is both rewarding and energizing. So talk for just a moment. What's the hardest thing for you about preparing to preach? And then conversely, what's the thing that you just love about preaching?
I think the hardest thing for me on the front end is kind of laying out the roadmap, because you're preparing weekly to preach, but then at some point in time in the process, you've also got to figure out where you're going next, and to be able to give that the time that it needs. And so again, I lay a roadmap out, but I also want to be flexible on the back end. And so if more time needs to be spent, as we get into the text more and understand it more. And so kind of for me, laying out that it's going to take me 10 months to preach through this book, trying to lay out that picture that's a challenge. And it takes, it takes some days, in the quiet, in the study, just digging into that text, up front all together and trying to lay out that roadmap. So that's always a challenge for me, because I don't want to belabor something that doesn't need to be belabored, but I also don't want to miss something because I give it too cursory of a glance. So that's kind of a challenge. And I'll tell you, one of the things that's really energized me, we've started doing this recently, is during our Monday morning staff meetings, we actually bring that week's text to the Monday morning staff meetings. And I've embraced kind of a collaborative model of preparation. And so I look at staff and, I give it to them ahead of time and say, hey, this is what we're preaching. This is what the sermon is Sunday. I want you guys to read the text. I want you to tell me questions that you have. I want you to give, what is some insight that you have. And it's been really rewarding just to have my student pastor, he said, these are questions that my students will probably ask. And so for me to be able to just have that kind of collaborative input has been profound. Our kids ministry director, she's a phenomenal young lady, but she comes to me with, she brings a women's perspective to the text, which is something I don't have access to without that sort of collaborative input. And so it's been really powerful for us to just look at that week of sermon preparation from a collaborative standpoint.
Yeah, I do something similar on Tuesday with our staff. And years ago, our building maintenance man was a bivocational pastor. And the questions that he asked, I always cherished because they always exposed the areas that I maybe had not spent as much time in thinking about, but needed to. So, he'd ask, what does this word mean? Or how does this connection? And whatever he asked, I was always writing it down going, okay, before Sunday gets here, I need to answer that question.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about your roadmap, are you in that mapping of where you're going, are you assigning the particular text with the date, or do you leave that a little bit more fluid?
We've got a shared sort of spreadsheet that my worship pastor and some staff members use, and so that spreadsheet kind of lays out the Sundays of the year. We've got it lists, are there holidays, are there emphases, are there things that we need to be paying attention to, that sort of thing. And so we've got all 52 Sundays of the year laid out with Good Friday and Christmas Eve. Those are two kind of important special services that we do. So I'm very much assigning dates to the text that we're preaching. And again, they know that I have the, kind of pastor privilege of moving it if I need to. And I will do that. But again, it notifies people that I've made those changes so that if they're planning and preparing in advance, they know that that's happening. But for the most part, I can hit that within 3 to 4 weeks without a whole lot of disruption.
Yeah, that's helpful. How far out are you? A whole year?
I try to plan the whole book.
Okay, you're right.
So what I will typically do is as I get closer to the end of a series, then I will go ahead and start working towards laying out the next book that I'll be preaching. And so right now we're looking towards the end of August to finish up Revelation. And so in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking to our elders and staff about what the Lord's leading us next. It'll be an Old Testament book, but what's next, and then we'll start kind of the process of nailing that down and getting that next roadmap laid out.
How long did it take you? How long has it taken you to preach through Revelation?
It will be here. Let me look at my roadmap. About 42, 43 weeks is what I'm looking at right now.
So were you able to do that in a year? Or were there some Sundays in there? Were there any Sundays in there that you were not in Revelation?
Nope, I've done that for the whole year.
Okay, excellent. So one of the things that that's always sort of on my mind is how do you press what happens in the pulpit on Sunday beyond that? You mentioned that you've got some of the people in your church are using the journaling single book publications that Crossway is doing. That's a brilliant idea, by the way. Anything else that y'all are doing to try to push the context of the sermon and what you talked about on Sunday beyond the Sunday morning event?
Yeah, I mean, we try to make the media available, of course, with all the various channels that are out there, YouTube, podcasts, whatever, so that they have access to that. I have people ask for notes all the time, and I've always kind of pushed back on having fill in the blank kind of notes where people can kind of keep follow along with notes that are on the screen and things like that. And I finally said, I'll start doing that because I've had enough people kind of ask for that. But beyond that, it's I don't have a great system for moving it beyond Sunday.
Do you know Mitch Jolly? He was a shorter alumnus.
I know his name. I don't know that I've ever met him.
So Mitch he's been on the podcast, and he's in Rome. He preaches in Rome, and he produces and puts online his full manuscript before the service.
Oh wow!
So his people are pulling the manuscript. I'm not sure if they're coming to church with it. I'm sure he has some people that do that, but I thought, man, that's a bold move. I do my full I call it my man. I put it in outline form, but it's a manuscript. I do it after the fact, and so encourage our people to pull that down and use it for study later. But I want to do a little editing after Sunday to make sure I got everything spelled right and that kind of stuff. But man,
I'll frequently have people ask for my Wednesday night notes because they're somewhere else. They're serving in some capacity, and they'll ask for my notes. And I'm like, my notes are for me. Like they're not written for you. I'm almost embarrassed to. It's like giving somebody my handwriting to try to read. Like, no, I didn't write that for you.
Well, it does change how you produce them. So before I started making mine available to the church, they were sort of a first draft. I didn't worry about punctuation. I didn't worry about spelling,
sure.
those sort of things. But man, when you're aware that people are going to see that, so Monday morning is my edit. I go back and edit it, and I usually take out like really personal stuff. Like if I have a full text illustration in there about my children or something, I usually generalize that a little bit before I send it out. But it does change how you think about, who knows where this is going, and
Absolutely.
So what do you take?
I don't know if I'm that vulnerable yet.
Well, and listen, just to think about the production process for Mitch producing that before he steps in the pulpit for his people, like, man, that's impressive.
Absolutely.
What do you take in the pulpit? Do you take manuscript? You take an outline? What's on the pulpit with you?
Actually use the sermon developer in Logos, and so I develop a pretty thorough outline. I'm very mindful of time. I don't want to go forever, and so I'm very mindful of time. So I want to outline as thoroughly as I can, because I know how long it takes to preach through my outlines, and so I bring an outline a very thorough outline to the pulpit with me.
I've never used I've seen it, but I've never used the sermon developer in Logos. Do you write inside Logos, or do you like in a Word document that you upload later?
Oh no, I write it all inside of Logos, and it's my sermon calendar is maintained in Logos. I'm pretty much a junkie to Logos.
Really? Well, I might need to take some lessons then on how to do that. I've tried to do it like back in, like upload them after the fact, but the formatting is always weird, and so I've just never. The searchability of Logos of the old sermons would be really interesting to me, but I've never engaged with it.
Well, in Logos, you type in a scripture reference, and if you want it actually the full text in your copy, you can hit a button and it inserts the full text in the copy, and so it's pretty powerful how it's from just a writing standpoint. It saves a few steps of copying and pasting. I'll say that. And then it syncs across off platforms, and so I bring an iPad with me, and my notes are there on my iPad, and so it syncs across everywhere. So
you preach from an iPad. Does that not make you nervous that it's going to fail on you mid-sermon?
There's a print copy sitting somewhere close by. Don't worry.
See, I just have nightmares. I never could go that route. I tried early on, and the anxiety for me was too great. I like paper.
It happened to me one time. And it was a terrifying moment because the internet freaked out and it didn't sync. And so when I tried to open it, things were not synced correctly. And I just had to own it and say, church, but here's a moment behind the scenes. The internet did not help us today. And so I had to pull the paper copy out and just explain to them what was going on. And they're very gracious. I didn't have any personnel committee meetings after that morning, but but there is always a paper copy nearby.
Yeah, I'm a little crazy on that side. I'm the guy that has, the dream that you're not prepared for the class. My dream is it's Sunday morning and I can't find my notes. And the whole dream is, running around the church trying to find where in the world I put my notes. So,
well, they're on your phone and your iPad if you're using Logos.
Well, and I have everything like PDF version. I could pull on the iPad and the phone, but no, I like a piece of paper. So yeah, it's an anxiety issue for me. So walk me through your preparation process. Monday morning, you sit down with your text. Walk me through Monday all the way to Sunday. How do you get from your text to the pulpit?
So Monday, obviously we've already got the text figured out before Monday gets here. And so Monday rolls around, and Monday morning spent collaborating with the team on any questions that they may have brought to the table. And I've already done some, a lot of preliminary work in terms of, reading some trusted commentaries and making sure that I'm thinking about the text appropriately so that I'm not walking into that collaborative meeting just with no clue of what's going on. Monday morning, we also spend time kind of developing the visuals that go along with it, and making sure that when we put notes on the screen, that the visuals are complementing what we're trying to speak to. By the end of Monday, most of the sermon is crafted, and so I'll usually spend most of Monday making sure that we're ready for the following Sunday. And then I kind of let it sit for a little bit. Wednesday nights are a lot more teaching driven, and so they're not quite as it's not as hard to put a Wednesday night Bible study together for me. And so I'll make sure Tuesday we've got Wednesday night ready to go. And then usually Thursday afternoon, I will just revisit everything, make sure that everything looks good. And then I've always found just Sunday morning, I get up early and I spend time, I spend a couple hours with that outline on Sunday morning and make sure that everything is still relevant. There's not been any situations that have come up that need to be dealt with or addressed or anything like that. And I always wait to put sort of the public facing things together until Sunday morning early, just so that's fresh and ready to go first thing Sunday morning, so that when it's go time, everything's ready to roll. So the Sunday morning early is really precious. Just spending time with that manuscript. It's the last time you see it before it's preached, and it's just a really precious time with the Lord and kind of the quiet of that day.
So you have written the sermon by Monday evening?
It's mostly put together. I won't say that that's always the case, but it's mostly put together.
Wow.
And ready to be hammered out. The final copy to be hammered out by the end of the week.
Brother, that's amazing. That's amazing. So how long do you spend, like, just the writing portion? How long does that take you to do?
Just the sit down and writing it, that's probably about a 3-hour process. That's not including, obviously, the study that goes into it on the front end. I sat in seminary and they said, you've got to spend 8 hours writing every sermon. And that's given to us by people who never actually pastored a church.
Yes.
And so it would be phenomenal.
True.
It'd be amazing to have 8 hours to do that, but it's actually writing it once I'm happy with language study. Once I'm happy with all that, it's probably a 2.5-3 hour process to get it all put on paper.
So I'm guessing you're a pretty quick writer then.
Yeah, it's that's something that happens pretty fast.
So I'm pretty slow. I'm very slow, I think. So that's why I'm just marveling at the fact that you're getting it done. And for me, it's like I got to go, I can't do it here at the church because there's too many distractions. And
sure,
it takes me a full day to do the writing portion. Wow.
No, and I shut my door, and staff knows that if my door's shut, that's time that I'm disposed of, and they know to generally leave me alone if the door is shut, because that's when I'm writing or studying and those sort of things. And so, thankfully, my office is generally a quiet place to work.
Yeah, I have an office and then a little hallway and then a private library that I have a little desk in. So I can shut, there are actually 3 doors I can shut between me and the hallway. And
that's nice.
I was in my office one day in the little library, trying to do the whole shut all my doors and get some stuff done. And I hear knock, 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 open, knock, 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 open. And then on the 3rd door, knock, 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 open. And this dear precious brother says, "Hey, you busy?" And I thought, well, not now.
You found me.
So I've just learned you got to leave campus if you want to get anything really done. So when you go to the pulpit, are you taking your laptop or your iPad with Logos on it? You're preaching from the Logos software?
Oh yeah, it's got a preaching screen, and so it makes the font big. My eyes are getting a little older than they used to be, and so I can make the font bigger on the fly. It's got a timer on it, so I mean my screen is counting down, so I know. I try to stick to 40 to 45 minutes, and so I've got a timer that's right there. I mean, so I've got a whole heads up display right there with my sermon and how long I've taken right there at my fingertips.
That 40-minute mark seems like just a sweet spot that's kind of where I am too. Have you always preached that length, or have you gotten longer the longer you've done it?
My last church, we were in 2 services for a long time, and the way we had to structure it, the early service, there was no time after the early service to. I didn't have a lot of time to work with, and so for years I had to kind of dial in to make sure that I was finished on time. And and then it became just a matter of conviction. I've got volunteers who are back in the back watching babies, and the kids are climbing the walls in children's church. And so I've got people that I'm counting on who are giving of their time. They're missing out on adult worship time because they're volunteering to serve children. And so I don't want them to resent me preaching. He's going to preach long today. I don't want them to have that conversation. And so it's a matter of respect for their time and, the sacrifices that they're making. And so I try to do that as I hate to use the term religiously as possible. And I got pretty good at sticking to that clock when we were in 2 services for so long.
Yeah. So you have served, your current church, you've been there 7 years, but the church you served before, where you are now, you were 12. Yeah. Those are some significant.
Over 12.
Yeah, those are some significant tenures. How did and has in your current place your preaching been seasoned by the length of relationships that you've had with your churches?
It's interesting you asked that question. I'll tell you a story of a sweet little lady that I had I'll call it a confrontation, but it was more of just it was a confrontational word of advice that she gave me very early on at my last church. I told you I was at a laboratory church and seminary, and there was a lot of things that were wrong in that church, and there were some things that happened that were very hurtful. I don't need to go into those details, but just it had caused me to put up some walls in my own heart, and just impacted how I was loving this new congregation. And this precious saint came up to me and she said, Pastor, we're not your last church.
Ooh.
And I was like, you're not at all my last church. And that was just such a freeing sort of thing. I thank God that she had the wisdom and discernment to be able to speak that to me.
Yes.
Because I couldn't have even, said that to myself at the time. Like I didn't even, it didn't even register that was happening. And so for her to come along and say that, said, okay, this is a different group of people with a different group of needs and a different opportunity set before them. We can approach this group of people very differently. The church I'm at now was actually the church I attended in college. I went, we both went to Shorter. We graduated from Shorter, but I spent a season at UT Chattanooga. And when I was at UT Chattanooga, I actually attended Chattanooga Valley Baptist Church for those 2.5 years. And so this was the church where I was called to preach from. This is the church where I had strayed, and this was the church that was instrumental in helping me get back on the straight and narrow where I needed to be.
Amen.
And so for me to come back here, there was a sense of homecoming for me. And so this was a people that were instrumental in my walk with Christ. And so before I was even called to pastor, this group of people was already investing in me and helping me to grow before I ever realized what they were helping me to grow into. And so to come back to this group there's almost a privilege of you guys invested so much in me, and now in God's providence, I get to invest in you. And so again, I look at it as a precious gift that God's given me to let me love these people that love me so well.
That's a blessing right there. That's a blessing. Wow. So what I have discovered is that the longer I have served a church, the better I know the church, the softer I speak, but the harder I preach. Does that communicate to you? So
absolutely.
I love them. So there's no joy in saying a hard thing. I mean, there's no, in early in ministry, hard things can be a substitute for, for hard preaching. That's that. I'm just going to say a hard thing, and there's some pride in that. But there's no joy in saying a hard thing. But I say those hard things now in part because I love my people more, and because I know them better than I knew them 5 years ago. And so I know the areas where we're struggling.
Sure.
How's that function in your ministry?
Yeah, I mean, there's almost a parental aspect to it. As a parent, I don't delight in having to discipline my child or anything like that. So I don't take any joy in those sort of conversations. But also, as a parent, know that those conversations are necessary. And so I have to be willing to have those conversations, and I have to be willing to say those hard things, but they come out of a position of love. Again, like you said, you speak softer. And so, there are times that Scripture rebukes us, and, God uses his word to tell us to shape up. And there's a lot of times where it speaks directly to something that we're doing wrong as a church, that we're doing wrong as a people, and just in an attitude of love. I mean, this is what God says. It's not what I said; it's what God said. And this is for such a time as this. God has set this in front of us, that this is something that we have to deal with. We have to do business with. So I completely understand what you're saying, especially as you serve a place for a long time, because I'm their pastor, but the idea that I'm not just the guy that they pay to preach on Sunday. Like I'm literally called to be the under shepherd towards these people, that Christ has put me in a position to love these people in grace and truth, just like he loves. And so I've got to speak that way to them.
I remember in seminary the encouragement to seek long tenures, and so I received that, and I understood then the importance of it, or appreciated the importance of it. But as I have experienced it in my ministry, the goodness, the sweetness of it, the power of it. I mean, just the ability to speak more authoritatively from the pulpit with the years that you've spent with the people is you just can't replicate in your first couple of years. But I was talking to somebody yesterday who is in the world of they help churches and pastors, find each other. So, helping churches and search committees and those sort of things. And we were talking about tenure. And they said that 5 years today, a 5-year tenure is the new 7 to 15 years. That's the average now. And that was heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
In 5 years, you're just figuring it out in 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's just now starting to take the shape that has your pastoral hand attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that you and I have lived is a changing landscape in churches, in approach to pastoral or preaching. So we mentioned that when we were in our undergraduate studies that expository preaching wasn't taught. Now we do need to say, I think you can affirm this with me, that by God's grace, many things have changed it shorter, and so praise God that.
Absolutely, I am proud to be a trustee at Shorter University.
Me too. But I've also, in a broader sense, this is my perception. I want to see if it's your perception. My sense of it is that in many churches that maybe 30 years ago were topical, preaching light, more attention to performance than substance. It seems like there has been a movement toward pastors preaching more with intentional approach to expository preaching, and churches receiving that well. In your spot in the state, do you see, is that something you have seen, or is that not something that's up there where you are?
One of the interesting things about this area is there's a very strong presence of kind of independent thinking up here. And I think it's an influence of kind of the Tennessee Temple University sort of influence that's here. And so it's smaller churches maybe are not embracing that method of preaching quite as much as some larger churches. And I think our seminaries have generally done a good job of moving the needle in terms of expository preaching. And I don't know, I was listening to your podcast with Jeremy Morton, and he was talking about education. And I think there is a place for, I think education is helping us to move that. Where there is less education, I think we are not seeing that movement happen quite as much. I think that's a fair way to put that.
I wonder if that's just the resources. I heard somebody say, not everybody who desires to preach expository sermons does it well. And I'll affirm that. But I think there's something to be said, at least for the heart for it, at least the heart to say, all right, I'm going to be as faithful with this text as I can be. There's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. And I think the churches that the pastors that I'm closest to, they're all like-minded in that regard, that we want to be faithful to the text. And I've got some good friends who are part of other conservative denominations. And so I'm even seeing that from those directions as well. So even outside of Baptist circles, I think that's true. But just that genuine desire to be faithful to what the text says. So I am thankful that I hang out with some really godly men who love the Word and love to teach what the Word says.
Yeah, my sense of it is that topical and I don't know the term for it, but other than just unfaithful preaching, when you preach or you open the Bible, you read a text, and then you say everything you say after that is not connected to the text at all. Whatever that is, if you're really strong in writing and creative things, maybe there's an appetite for that for a while. But it seems to me that runs thin pretty quick. And when people are exposed to faithful biblical preaching, I think it lights them on fire, and that's the encouraging part that I'm seeing happening out there.
Yeah, I'd agree wholeheartedly.
All right, so just to put a bow on it, and as a final question, Brian, you've been in the ministry now over 20 years, so you've got some experience. If you had hair, you'd be gray at this point. And so speak to your younger self. Give some counsel to young Brian Carroll getting started without any experience. What are the things that you would say to your younger self? Brian, these are the things that you need to invest in. They're worthy of your attention and your effort. And what are the things that you would say, man, avoid these things that you think they're important, but they're not?
Man, that is a great question. The thing that maybe I would spend less time thinking about, and I don't, this is going to come across harsh, to care less about what people think. I think younger me was very, very concerned with what people thought about what I preached, what I wore. I mean, just the whole gamut. The younger me was very much concerned about the fishbowl effect of being a pastor. I'm in this fishbowl, and I'm constantly, everything's being scrutinized, and so worried less about that. That's something that I struggled with, and a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that. And so my identity was being driven more by what church people thought than what God was calling me to be as a preacher and a pastor. At the same time, I don't know who said it, but they don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And so I think seminary does a great job of giving you all sorts of knowledge, but it doesn't do such a great job of helping you learn how to love people. I don't know that I took a class in seminary about how to love your flock well. I can exegete the Greek verbs, but what does it look like to go and sit with somebody whose husband's dying?
Right.
And I think for me, when I was first in a church, trying to figure out how to pastor while going to school, the academics and the rigor and all of the things that you're learning about the Bible and learning about theology and learning about history and learning about Greek and Hebrew, all those things, they're helpful, but they're not very helpful when you're needed there at the bedside, or when you're not, or you're there for that tragic moment. And so learning to care more for people would have been a very helpful thing for younger Brian to have learned. At the same time, I would have told younger Brian to invest in those tools that are most beneficial. And so the tools in seminary, the academic commentaries aren't necessarily always the most helpful when it comes to, working a sermon out for Mother's Day, and so investing in those tools that are most helpful would be something that I would certainly tell younger me to pay attention to.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Well, Brian, thank you so much for giving of your time today and having this conversation. I think it's been very helpful, and I appreciate you being on the View from the Pulpit podcast.
Absolutely. Glad to be here and thankful to have some time to chat.
Indeed. And from two shorter trustees, send your kids to Shorter. It's a great school.
Yes, great school. Send them this year. We could use them.
We need the students. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian Carroll. Good to talk to you today.
All right. You too, man.
Thank you for listening to View from the Pulpit. For more information, go to my website at bensmithsenior.org. That's bensmithsr.org. You can follow me on X at x.com/BenSmithSR. I look forward to meeting you next week for another conversation on View from the Pulpit.